We, the people of Detroit, is dedicated to community coalition building and to the provision of resources that inform, train, and mobilize the citizens of Detroit and beyond to improve their quality of life. As a community-based grassroots organization, we, the people of Detroit, aim to inform, educate, and empower Detroit residents on imperative issues surrounding civil rights, land, water, education, and the democratic process. For more information, call 844-42-WATER, 844-42-WATER, or email wethepeopleofdetroit.com.
Wake up, Detroit. I'm Joanne Watson, and this is your wake-up call.
When a brown girl child is born, the earth shifts. The sun is at half-mast. The moon waits for her first cry. The ancestors set the table. The flowers turn red as blood. This is your land, continent daughter, with tree trunk legs and branches for arms. This is your soil, black and fertile as your eyes facing an apartheid, Jim Crow, current, past memory. Some of us begin the removal of shackles at birth. We grow into the armor of struggle quickly. We brew courage in our tea, blend bravery into our Sunday dinners. Joanne Watson, you understand nation building is not a part-time job. This dedicated life is sometimes lonely, a vulnerable choice, but it is the only way you know how to operate. You are wired for the movement in your black women bones, even when tired, still fighting, still organizing, still singing morning spirituals. You were born to lead, even in your own family, the eldest of 10 children born to Jefferson and Lestine. You made Damon, Nefertari, Stephen, Maya. Her children always knew she was larger than life. When you are a woman in the movement, you take the children with you on the journey. You bring the babies with you to your college classes. When you travel to Ghana for the first time, it will be with your daughters in tow. When you are a fearless, nationalist thinking mama, mothering never stops with your own babies. 30 godchildren and mentees across the globe. The daughter of a ministering mother is already ordained for good trouble. A seer, a prophetic young student preparing for her lifelong role as servant to her own community. When your purse was snatched in a Farmer Jack parking lot many years ago with your kids' tickets to Run DMC in the purse, you made sure they still got to that concert and even hosted Melly Mel and the Furious Five in your living room, because queens make it look easy. When you're a single mom, people will tell you what you can't do. Instead, you move to New York City with all 4 of your C's to do your necessary work with the YWCA, because queens make it look easy. Ghana, Togo, South Africa, where is your heart, Mama Watson? Nurturing spirit, baking melt in your mouth, homemade biscuits. How many hours do you sleep, Warrior Watson, with endless work ethic and blue-collar blood racing through your veins? How do we say thank you for your work, your time, your heart? We know you will never really retire. There is a fire on the path to freedom. There is smoke, there is sacrifice, there are stories of justice, of women, of Tubman, Sojourner, of Angela, Asada, Coretta, and Merle, and Betty, and Queen Mother Moore. Some of us know we are ancient, that our marrow is laced with legacy, that we are here to bring light to our daughters. Sometimes it just takes one woman, a mother, a grandmother, a Spitfire, griot, a sister, the only woman to lead the NAACP's largest chapter. She, daughter of the movement, of Rosa, of Irma. She was a birth that gave birth to possibility for other young activists like me, a true D woman, frontline Fatima, Nigerian blood, councilwoman, leader, truth teller, Joanne Watson, social worker, president of the Anti-Klan Network, sister, inspiration, dedicated to the protection of girls and the voices of women wrapped in West African beauty, regal and resilient. Wake up, Detroit. Wake up, South Africa. Wake up, Cuba. Wake up, small business owners. Wake up, White House. Wake up, reparations. Wake up, teachers. Wake up, women. Wake up, schools. Sleeping is not an option when the Honorable Joanne Watson is in the room.
It's a wonderful day to rise and shine, and we're so blessed to have Dennis Boatwright in the house.
Oh, yes.
come and tell us some truth this morning. We want to hear that truth. First, tell us about yourself.
Yes, my name is Dennis Boatwright, and
Get a little closer to the mic.
Yes, my name is Dennis Boatwright, and I'm the director of the Center for Pan-African Studies, a think tank that's based here in Detroit. I'm a lifetime Detroit resident and an activist as well as a educator.
Who have been your mentors?
Actually, you have been one of my mentors, and to be quite honest, every time I ride downtown, I see that Spirit of Detroit statue, and I say that should be Joanne Watson because you represent Detroit spirit very well, and you have done it, decades. But to answer your question, my mentors been people like Dr. Claude Anderson.
Oh my! Do you know I just talked to him 2 days ago?
I can imagine.
I love Dr. Claude Anderson.
Yeah. I had seen you and him conversing at the African Museum several times, and y'all have great conversations.
He says he's my only friend.
Oh yeah,
That's what he always says.
Oh yeah,
I'm your only friend.
Yeah, and you and both of him, you and him represent Detroit well, but also Dr. John Henry Clark.
Oh my.
Amos Wilson, Francis Cress Welsing, Marcus Garvey, obviously, and Malcolm X.
Well, El Haj Malik El Shabazz. When I think about Malcolm X, whose birthday we just celebrated not long ago, last week, it's important for us to remember he had an office in Detroit on Linwood and Burlingame, Group on Advanced Leadership, which he opened with Reverend Milton Henry, who was one of my mentors. Reverend Milton Gaidi Obedelli, the brother of the great Dr. Mario Obedelli, one of the founders of NCOBRA, also known as Richard Henry. And they would sit in their office on Linwood and Burlingame, not far from where the Nation of Islam was founded, not far from where the Shrine of the Black Madonna was founded. So something special about Linwood, something special. And Malcolm X walked the streets of Detroit. We ought to be so proud.
Oh yes. He deserved that name, his nickname, the only nickname he had, Detroit Red.
That's right.
He deserves that name.
That's right. We love and honor Malcolm X. Yes, we do. And you have come to help straighten out some misstatements that have been put out there.
Oh yes. You're talking about in regards to Dr. Zahi Hawas, Egyptian archaeologist. Yes, I come out here to really charge the community because I started to notice that the African-centered community in particular have been on an increasing attack lately, and it all originated from 2 years ago. A group of scholars had planned to have a conference in Egypt.
Yes.
And when they got there, they start to feel that their conference was being sabotaged.
Oh my.
I mean, 5-star hotels, all of a sudden their water and electricity wasn't working. People were getting their visas revoked. And they got to a point where scholars, and I'm not going to mention their names, so many scholars have told me that they started fearing for their lives.
Oh my.
So what happened is, this is why, and you were there too, we had that conference here in Detroit last year because they had to cancel the one in Egypt because they feared for their life. But to make a long story short, I had the people who organized that, they contacted me and they was like, well, we're not allowed to go to Egypt to, speak the truth about our people, and we don't know who to turn to. So they called me here, and I wrote an article, and by the mercy of the Creator and our ancestors, it gained momentum. And we points out in that article how, Hawas is he's on the 23 city tour. Mm-hmm. And we call it, we dubbed it the Not by Africa tour, whereas he is saying that the people who laid the foundation of dynastic Egypt weren't black, and they were in fact his people. He said that, and this pretty much enraged people, and I responded to that, and he's going to be here May 26th, and we plan to give him a Detroit welcome.
Mm-hmm. Well, Egypt is Africa.
Yes.
Egypt is Africa.
Yes.
That would be like trying to say Highland Park is not connected to Detroit. Egypt is Africa. And down through the years, people have tried to sabotage the history, the antiquity of Egypt, to separate it from Africa. They stole it from Egypt, which means they stole from Africa, like the so-called Great Museum in Britain that hijacked some grand archival and spiritual data replicas in Egypt, then claimed that they had manifest destiny over it. You can't have manifest destiny over something you stole. That's grand theft. That's not destiny, that's theft.
That's exactly what it is, and you hit on a good point, and Amos Wilson brought that out. See, if we allow Hawas to go unopposed, we risk our kids being further miseducated, because Hawas has garnered the support of, I'm not going to say any former presidents, who he's their tour guide when he goes to Egypt. Ironically, Will Smith, that's his personal tour guide, and we know that Jada Smith is, behind, the new Cleopatra documentary, and also Angelo Jolie and many stars. So he's the go-to guy. He has credibility. But back to what Amos Wilson said. Amos Wilson said, if we doesn't oppose the racist narrative, the anti-black racist narrative about our history, we're going to allow them to dominate the narrative. And when that happens, we start re-enslaving ourselves, because you only know your history is your historical memory.
That's it.
And what Hawas is trying to do, he's trying to erase us out our own history by using absurdities, coming up with these fanciful ideals that Egypt is not a part of Africa. And I want to ask them, when did Egypt not become a part of Africa?
When they try so hard to take Africa out of its greatness. Even when you look at world maps, it always has the United States, North America looking about the same size as Africa. Absolutely untrue. Not true at all. The size and the majesty of Africa and the wealth of Africa, which is the birth of humankind, all humanity began in Africa. So the truth is, everybody's of African descent, because human life, and so did civilization, began in Africa, not Rome and Greece. Civilization began in Africa, where the first universities, Timbuktu, the first archaeologists, the first musicians, the first architects. They still don't know how they built the pyramids. Their genius has not reached that point.
Yeah, that's really one thing about the playbook of oppression and, colonizers, invaders, is that they cannot allow us, they can't give us Egypt, because if they give us, say, people of African descent, or were the founders of ancient Egypt, it has shattered their myth of being inferior. And you bring up a point that is much more than a Cleopatra, even much more than a Kevin Hart situation.
That's right.
It's about domination. And I brought it out, in 1976, there was a movie called The Message about the Prophet Muhammad, and the leading actor in there was Anthony Quinn, a white man with no Arab. Hawas and his people didn't object to that. But I bring this out to say that they don't want to concede anything noteworthy to blacks. They rather say that they would, if they had the choice, they would say Chinese people built those pyramids instead of people of African descent. So this is a much bigger than the Cleopatra thing. This has to do with power and domination over people of African descent. And what's going on, and you've been around, and you have more experience in this than me in terms of meeting some of our great intellectuals. What's happening is they know that Dr. Yosef Ben Yakinan not here.
My.
They know that Dr. Clark is not here. They know that Chancellor Williams not here.
My.
They know that Amos Wilson not here.
Say that.
I say this to say that Hawas and as a people represent an anti-black revival because they feel that some of our blessed scholars is not here no more. So they feel that we are vulnerable, and that's why they're attacking everything. You telling the comedian.
But look at a scholar like yourself
Well, yeah.
coming in, and there's some more scholars who are stepping up and stepping in. So you never erase the genius of our background.
Yep, and you know, here's the thing. I was talking to the brother G. Mac Gregg over there at Keebaline, and we were, you know, he made a great observation. In fact, see, sometimes an event that we perceive as negative turn out to be a blessing. And what Hawas is actually doing, he's actually galvanizing and uniting the black community around this issue. Now, you have organizations who are now black organizations, particularly in Detroit. Not to mention, we didn't receive a lot of support from L.A. We got people who flow in from L.A. and New York
Excellent.
to come to support us. But what's happening with this, Ms. Watson, is that we have groups that ordinarily weren't talking to each other on a daily basis. Now we're talking to each other.
Excellent.
So Hawas don't realize that he has ignited and inspired a lot of baby Dr. John Henry Clarks.
Come on now. That's exactly right. And as we really lay the foundation for truth as it relates to not only African heritage, it's not just good for African people, it's good for all people to know the truth. Because there is no truth that exists in the telling of the story of how this country got founded. This country was not founded based on people of African descent selling themselves into slavery. The slave ships were built in the state of Rhode Island. It was the economy of Rhode Island. And African people were not standing on the west coast of Africa saying, please come get me. They were kidnapped at gunpoint. They were technically prisoners of war. Prisoners of war. And the village chiefs who objected to the Europeans coming in stealing their young people were beheaded. They were assassinated. That story is not told.
You know, you're exactly right, and I like when you bring up the point. You know, African history is really about human history.
That's right.
All people. And believe it or not, you know, Dr. Clark made an ironic statement. He said, you know what? All our research come from white European scholars. They the one that put it out there that
That's
the
right.
Egyptians were black. Count Vaughan and even people like the general of Napoleon.
That's right.
He said that these people were black. And
That's
then we
right.
have Martin Brunel. And then not only that, we go back to one of our most quoted statements, one of our most potent weapons is with Herodotus.
That's right.
Who was he used to be the father. He is the father of European history. He was a Greek, and he described what he had saw, and he said the Egyptians were dark skinned with woolly hair, and tall and slender.
And who is that?
And not only that, there's another description he said they love music and dance. Now, who fits that description?
My. That's a perfect description of African people.
Right, and we're talking about 460 BC. So African history is a human history,
That's
particularly
right.
in Egypt. And like we have European scholars, even today, like Martin Brunel and a sister named Sally Ashton, a scholar, white European lady, who emphatically said they were black. But you're going to have people that come out this is what I tell people. When you look at Dr. John Henry Clark, he had a famous debate with Mary Lefowitz about her book, Not Out of Africa. And I always remind people that debate was taken back. Well, actually, it wasn't a debate because John Henry Clark said, I only debate my equals.
That's it.
But anyway, that was their best scholar. But he pointed out that this happened in 1992.
Mm-hmm.
John Henry Clark was blind. But John Henry Clark found it necessary to get out of his bed and come debate this lady for us. And he was blind in retirement, couldn't see. So our scholar has made it clear the importance of us for defending the integrity of our history.
He came here when he was blind. He spoke at the Lewis College of Business, which was the only historical black institution in town, at the invitation of one of our leaders of the Council of Elders, Dr. Robert O'Bland. He was blind, and he spoke and gave a lecture 2 hours. We didn't want to leave. He gave a 2-hour lecture
Wow, I
And it was
missed it.
magnificent. It was we hung on every word. He was so profound and so in love with his people. You could just feel it. And many, many leaders of our community were present and drinking it in. And I'm so proud that Detroit has always had that history of some people who are conscious enough to recognize greatness in their midst. And they showed up. They showed up. And he just poured himself into us. I'll never forget it. Dr. Yosef Ben Yochanan came here many times. Once he came at the request of Elder Clarence Harris, who was the founder of Soul Days over at Northwestern High School, a great man. And he wouldn't accept any pay. Wouldn't accept any pay to come and just talk to people to help them know who they are and help them understand where heaven was. Dr. Yosef Ben Yochanan.
You know, it's just fascinating. I wasn't able to see Dr. John Henry Clark, but I always go to Convent Street in Harlem to clean up the house, the Dr. John Henry Clark house. I bring my kids out there, and you bring up Detroit. Detroit has always welcomed scholarships and excellence. People like Martin Luther King.
That's right.
I
That's
have a
right.
dream speech.
When the Reverend Dr. C.L. Franklin, Aretha and I were friends, and her father invited Dr. King here for that walk to freedom that he had in June '63 before the March on Washington. And some of the local Negroes got so jealous of Reverend Dr. C.L. Franklin, help me, Holy Ghost, that they sent a message to King not to come. It'll just make Reverend Franklin look good. Don't come. And Dr. King told them, I must come. I gave my word. And anyway, he's on my board of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and he helps fund our work. So I gave him my word, I'm coming. They sent him message that these so-called connected Negroes, help me, Holy Ghost, tried to stop Dr. King from coming here. He actually had to come to Detroit and have a press conference to let the media know, yes, I am coming. Can you imagine that? And then the Negroes who tried to stop him from coming tried to put themselves on the front line of the march, had signs printed like it was their march. That just shows you the level of internalized oppression that exists among our people.
Yes, and I'm glad you brought that up. That's one of the issues that we had, you know, whether it was Malcolm X being betrayed, whether it was Nat Turner being betrayed, whether it was Gabriel Prosser being betrayed.
Say so.
Or whether it was a black person who was to recruit for the Tuskegee Institute
Yes.
treatment. We have those betrayals, and then we had to set up mechanism with to deal with it. But getting to the Detroit issue is that we know that Malcolm X did his Ballad of the Bullet here
right.
in Detroit.
That's
I
right.
say this to say that Detroit has always welcomed scholarship. We are the hotbed of black politics. And I bring this up to say this, and many people, even one of the brothers that flew in from Detroit, one of the scholars, he made an interesting observation. A lot of times we may take this for granted. He was on the phone. He was telling other scholars in L.A., he said, all I see is black people walking down the street. I don't see other people. This is black. And, you know, he made a big thing of it. And to me, you know, this is normal. But people really look at us as the center, the mecca of black politics.
That's right.
And I say this, I want to add that I had did a radio interview for WBAI 99.5 FM with Dr. James McIntosh and Leonard Jeffries.
Oh, my. Dr. J.
And off record, they told me, you know, after the interview was over, they told me, they said, well, Dennis, they also called me Imhotep. They was Imhotep, you know, we're expecting Detroit to set the tone and the model for how do we respond to Dr. Zahi Hawas. So we have people, we're on a verge of really starting a classical African revival here in Detroit. They're expecting our leadership to flower. And that's why, you know, I'm just so happy for you here. I know when Joanne Watson want me here, whether it's being at the Detroit Reparation Task Force or even here, I know it's going to be serious. We got serious people here.
You know, we are blessed to have our roots here. When I think about Paul Robeson, who could come to Detroit, hosted by Reverend Charles Hill, who then was the pastor of Hartford Baptist Church, when Paul Robeson had his visa and his passport taken away by this racist government. They took away the quality of his life, his ability to make a living by not allowing him to travel the world and make speeches. He spoke multiple languages, so he could speak anywhere in their own language. And they loved him. They welcomed him around the world. But because he talked about America's racism, the United States put a ban on his travel and forced him to stay only in the United States and not have a way to earn a living. But the great Reverend Charles Hill invited him to Detroit, where he had a standing room audience. His bodyguards were the Honorable Coleman A. Young before he was mayor.
Wow.
And Dave Moore, who was a black man, co-founder of the UAW. Dave Moore was also the person who picked up Mother Rosa Parks from the airport when she had to fly into Detroit to escape the racism from Montgomery, Alabama. But the fact that Coleman Young and Dave Moore were the bodyguards of Paul Robeson, and Mother Irma Henderson cooked a beef brisket for him in her house, and he slept at her house, and she fed him, took care of him, and he was safe there in the house. So you see how the connection, they were all young then, before any of them were elected to anything. They surrounded Paul Robeson, who was our hero, who was magnificent, who was greater than anyone was ever even able to understand at that point. Paul Robeson, who had multiple degrees, and was a sports star, and a lecturer, and a movie star, an orator, a singer. He did everything well, including talking about the institutional racism in this country. And that's what led him to be persona non grata.
Oh,
but he was welcome in Detroit.
He was welcome in Detroit. And, you bring up Paul Robeson, and, he's one of the persons I actually admire so much that I actually went to go visit his gravesite in New York. He's at the same cemetery as Malcolm X.
Yeah.
And he kind of close to James Baldwin, believe it or not. And there are people there. When I go there, I always clean off his gravesite and everything. And you brought, when you bring up Paul Robeson, reminds me of another great person, and that is Harry Belafonte.
Oh, he was great.
I was unfortunate. I was never able to get up close and meet him, but, he's one of the people who inspired me.
I loved him. Thanks to Congressman John Conyers, I had opportunities to be in Harry Belafonte's presence many times. And he was just as authentic as he seemed to be. And one of the things that hurt me about Harry Belafonte paid for those King children to go to college. Dr. King didn't leave any endowment. He didn't leave any big bank account. So Harry Belafonte paid for all the children to go to college and never talked about it. Never talked about it. He never said, I did this, and patted himself on it. He did it quietly, humbly, sweetly, and supported all of Dr. King's initiatives even after he had been assassinated. And when Coretta died, I flew to Coretta's funeral in Georgia, and learned when I got there that Harry Belafonte was sitting on the front seat of the church, but he had wanted to speak on the program. One of the white speakers, George Bush, help me now, was afraid that Harry Belafonte might get up and say something anti his administration, and told the daughter, Bernice, please don't let Harry Belafonte speak. So wow. I was crushed, because I knew the backdrop of how much he had done for the King family. And to have him barred from speaking because Bush said so, Bush should not be in charge of who speaks at Coretta Scott King's funeral. But and then, there were others who spoke very well, but nobody should have been ahead of Harry Belafonte.
No, nobody. And that when you bring that up, that just reminds us how we have to empower ourselves.
Yes.
Because these are power moves, and what happens is people of African descent, we think the symbols of power is actually power. And when you study power, we really don't have anything. We have potential power, but by even like this Hawas situation, we just have to come together to get real power, because
That's
we
right.
actually have real potential power. But there's some missing ingredients, and it has to do with us understanding who we are.
And that's it. We're going to talk more about that missing ingredient right after this break. Wake up, Detroit.
This is Bruce Simpson, your City of Detroit Ombudsman. I am here to address all of your complaints and concerns. If you need assistance regarding city services, please contact my office at 313-224-6000 or contact us via email at ombudsman@detroitmi.gov. This is Bruce Simpson, your City of Detroit Ombudsman.
Justice for Mario Willis. Truth. Facts. Evidence. Matter. Log into justiceformariowillis.com. Read for yourself.
I'm Wayne County Treasurer Eric Sabri. We are living through unprecedented times with a global pandemic now approaching its third year. As a result, the Michigan Homeowner Assistance Fund was created. This fund, administered by the state of Michigan, is designed to help homeowners cope with pandemic-related hardships, such as delinquent property taxes. To see if you qualify, please visit. Call 313-388-9799 or email taxinfo@waynecounty.com. We're here to help.
The courtroom belongs to the people. Doesn't belong to the judge, doesn't belong to the lawyers, does not belong to any individual, but it is an entity which belongs to the people.
That was my mother, Geraldine Bledsoe Ford, the third female jurist in the state of Michigan. She taught me to follow in her judicial footsteps, to be fair but firm, and that the courtroom belongs to the people. Deborah Geraldine Bledsoe Ford.
We, the People of Detroit, is dedicated to community coalition building and to the provision of resources that inform, train, and mobilize the citizens of Detroit and beyond to improve their quality of life. As a community-based grassroots organization, We, the People of Detroit, aim to inform, educate, and empower Detroit residents on imperative issues surrounding civil rights, land, water, education, and the democratic process. For more information, call 844-42-WATER, 844-42-WATER, or email wethepeopleofdetroit.com.
Wake up, Detroit. I'm Joanne Watson, and this is your wake-up call.
Wake up, Detroit. I'm Joanne Watson. This is your wake-up call, and we're so blessed to have Dennis Boatwright in the house. We always want to say a special thank you to We, the People of Detroit, our sponsor, which is doing such wonderful work in our community. They are water warriors. They are analytical. They are writing books. They're going door to door helping the people, standing up and advocating on behalf of dignity and freedom and justice for our people right now. Thank you, We, the People of Detroit. Dennis Boatwright was just talking about power and how we really gain power as we understand who we are.
Oh, yes. And that's where really, my academic area of expertise is political science, particularly international relations, foreign policy, and we know that political science really is the study of power.
That's right.
And what happens is, in order for, when you look at every great nation, whether it's economic, whether we agree with their political philosophy or not, whether it's economically or militarily, they have a strong collective consciousness of themselves.
Yes.
And whether you look at China or Russia or India, you see these are people who know who they are.
They're nationalistic.
And what happened is your collective consciousness serves as the glue to bring you together. And that's why, excuse me, John Henry Clark had made an interesting observation. And one of the last statements he said before he transitioned, one of the last major statements he made before he transitioned, he said Pan-Africanism or Paris. And what he meant by that, we have a sentiment, whereas we view all people of African descent as one unit.
That's right.
And we're striving to unite them and work for our own collective interests.
That's right.
But what's happened is We don't really have that now because of the legacy of slavery, the legacy of COINTELPRO, and many other programs that we don't even know about that keep us fractured. And what you have is, and by the way, to put this all in context, when George Floyd got murdered, I immediately got in my car with my wife and kids. She had rollers in her hair, and we went up to Minnesota, Minneapolis, and St. Paul. While the buildings was, smoke coming out the buildings, and we ended up driving 140,000 miles in our car within 11 months.
Wow. Meeting
people. But one of the disheartening things that I noticed is that we have many black organizations there who are doing wonderful things, and they have many programs separately. But there's none.
They need to unify.
They need to unify. They're like in their own silos. So I tell people our potential power, once we develop somewhat of just even a sentiment that we care about each other, we're concerned about each other's well-being, that in itself is where our power is going to come in.
That's exactly right. When I was serving on city council and sponsored the legislation to have an African town here, with Dr. Claude Anderson providing the research and the study to determine what kind of products we buy more than other products and what kind of products should be manufactured here. Of course, the European press lined up, said it was racist, reverse racist, it was divisive, should not be. Here is a city that has a Mexican town, that has a Greek town, and the Greek town got its start from the Honorable Coleman A. Young taking them to the pension board and getting them the first down payment for their development downtown. So Greek town didn't get started because of Greek man, it got started from a black man named Coleman Young. Anybody who knows the history, so the significance of in an African town would not mean only black people should shop there. Everybody goes to Greek town. Everybody goes to Mexican town. Everybody should come to an African town. And the city at that time was 90% black. And we only own 2% of the businesses. We still only own 2% of the businesses in Detroit, which is a disgrace.
It's terrible. And, Dr. Claude Anderson points that out in Black Labor, White Wealth, as well as Powernomics. And, see, this is about power. And really, racism really is motivated by economic.
That's right.
Racism just a pretext, just an excuse, but it's really money.
That's exactly right.
People
That's
eating,
exactly right.
To put it mildly, people eating off of black people suffering.
That's
and when
right.
you look at Hawas, we're talking about in Egypt, they're making like $30 billion a year annually from tourism. And Hawas, all of his conferences in each city, they are sold out, and affluent people are going there. So he's making the millions of dollars off our history, and he's not giving none of his revenue to some of the black schools around here or hospitals. He's keeping it for himself. So what happens is, with Hawas and many other people, even slavery, there's the economic rationale for this, and we're making people money. And you mentioned African town. See, if we were to wake up, any people, in order to, like when you look at the socioeconomic indicators of Detroit, and you look even driving through Highland Park or even Detroit, and you see what conditions some of the neighborhoods are, your real reason why that is happening is that if we become awakened, if, say, for instance, we're 80% black, and we're going to try to get back up to 83, 84%, and we're working on that. But what happens is once we become conscious, we will, because, every economist say this in political science, in order for a group of people to be self-sustained, if you're 80% of the population, you should own 80% of the business and the revenue. But if we have more people listening to the Joanne Watson show, Wake Up Detroit, what'll happen is it'll start changing our consciousness in the right direction, and they don't want that because, as Dr. Claude Anderson said, he said most of the revenue, what did he say, like 92% of it is owned by other people that doesn't look like us. So They don't want an African town because that's a big statement. And when you got an African town, that's a reflection of the consciousness of the people. So yes, they're going to oppose you because you really what you're talking about. That's
a white guy called my office in my last campaign, the day after the election. I was in my office. I never took a day off work. When everybody else was on recess, I showed up because it was the little people who put me in. I knew how I get in office. So I wanted to be there when citizens showed up and needed somebody to help them. This white guy called my office and asked, how did you get back in there? How did you get reelected? That's why we put so much money in those other campaigns, so you wouldn't get back in. Said that to me. I said, where do you live? Grosse Pointe. I said, uh-huh. Have a good day.
These are mercenaries pretty much that's coming here, and they even, we look at some of the law enforcement, and 80% of them don't live in the city of Detroit.
That's right.
And I tell
and
people
firefighters.
that, here it is. I was riding past, when I ride down when I noticed, I'm like, how, Highland Park is black. How do you get all these white police officers riding past? And I'm not saying they're bad people or nothing, but I found that kind of ironic that you have a majority black city.
Well, see, residency used to be in the charter. When the Honorable Coleman Alexander Young was mayor, they never would have been able to successfully remove the residency provision. As soon as he was out of office, the police union and the fire union went to the state of Michigan, the state legislature, and got them to introduce state legislation saying that a city that had this much population, and only Detroit would fit that description, and this kind of a backdrop could not require people to live inside your municipality. That was done immediately after Mayor Young was out of office.
And what type of, I was just, I can imagine I had to look at the records of.
So it went from 100% back then, police, firefighters, anybody who worked for the city had to live in the city. After the residency provision was removed by the state of Michigan, the fire department went 80% non-resident. Police department, more than 70% non-resident. So it not only robs the city of the kind of leadership and protection it needs, it also robs you of tax dollars. That means they're paying taxes to Brownsville Township, Macomb County. They're not paying taxes here. And if there was an emergency in Detroit, they'd have to travel some to get back here where they're getting paid. If Detroit is good enough to pay you, it ought to be good enough for you to live in.
You're right. You bring up, the non-residency clause in the charter, and that's a good point because, it makes me really reflect upon the ramifications of that.
Yeah.
That happened, and many people don't understand that. And I brought this up because, sometimes I see some of these police officers that don't live here, and they seem like they come here to play cops and robbers for 8 hours and they go home. I see them. I see the glee in their face, and it is those sense of, attachment to the community. And I bring this up, to their credit. I think it was one of the Detroit locals, I don't know if it was Channel 7, Channel 4, they had a story about a black police officer who punched a Detroit citizen and knocked him out down in Greektown, and 10 days later he got hired by Grosse Pointe Police Department. And I say this to say, and he doesn't even live in Detroit. So we have a bunch of people who come in here as hired mercenaries who have no love, like yourself, for the city of Detroit. So how do we expect people who's there to serve and protect us?
That's right.
And they don't even know us. They don't even live next door to us. So you bring up a great point, and I think that point needs to be really highlighted about that non-residency clause that you mentioned.
And given all the Homeland Security kind of emphasis that's happening in America now, it ought to be a Homeland Security issue. So if your frontline officials, to keep you safe, all live somewhere else, how is that secure? How is that keeping you safe? As a Homeland Security issue, it should be mandated that everybody who's on the front line live in the city that is paying you to protect them. That's a no-brainer.
That's a no-brainer, and we need people to really to spread that message, and actually in a sense of urgency.
That's right.
Because people will call meetings and they say we're going to table this, and we don't hear them for 9 months, 13 months, and eventually people lose interest.
That's right.
And that's why what happened is I was in Baltimore, Maryland, for the State of the Black World conference hosted by Dr. Ronald Daniels in Baltimore, and what was it, last month? And he pointed out, not him, well, one of the attendees pointed out, who was also a vendor there, he pointed out that African Americans, we don't really have a good follow-up plan. We'll have the conferences, and then he said we'll meet most of the time, on average 2 times. We had 2 meetings after the major conference, and then eventually the idea will fizzle out. So what we need to do, we need to put structures in to keep that momentum going, keep people's mind attracted to what we're trying to do, and not let a great ideal just dissipate. And that's really what happened. You have to have follow-ups. Same way what I was pointing out, me and the sister Professor Nubia, we were talking about, we're enthusiastic about helping out the Detroit Reparation Task Force, but we want
that next meeting, by the way, is Saturday, June 3rd, from 2 to 4.
Okay.
Saturday, June the 3rd, from 2 to 4 p.m. at the Northwest campus of Wayne County Community College in the Larry Lewis building. That 8200 West Outer Drive is the address of the Northwest campus of Wayne County Community College District. All are invited, all are welcome to speak and to be a part of that program, the Reparations Task Force. We need you to be there to keep everybody honest and on point.
No, thanks for bringing that up.
I thank you for bringing it up. We're going to wish you all a wonderful day. I'm going to have Dennis Boatwright back here 3 or 4 times this year.
Oh, yes.
Because his information is critical, and a young scholar who is building that bridge between the generation of scholars that all of us revere and the generation that's coming up. We need to recognize when to pass the mantle. We need to recognize when we need to showcase young scholars, young academicians who love our people. And the key is love. The more you know about who you are, the more you love yourself. And it's love that will take us to the mountaintop. I want to thank you, Dennis Boatwright, for being such a wonderful guest. And we're going to have you many times.
Thank you, and it was an honor to be here.
It's my honor. It's such a privilege. Such a privilege. I cannot tell you, my heart is full to have a young man like yourself so filled with knowledge and love for our people. Praise be to God. We give God all the praise. Only God is worthy to be praised. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. And the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. Amen. Wake up, Detroit.
We, the people of Detroit, is dedicated to community coalition building and to the provision of resources that inform, train, and mobilize the citizens of Detroit and beyond to improve their quality of life. As a community-based grassroots organization, we, the people of Detroit, aim to inform, educate, and empower Detroit residents on imperative issues surrounding civil rights, land, water, education, and the democratic process. For more information, call 844-42-WATER, 844-42-WATER, or email wethepeopleofdetroit.com.
Wake up, Detroit. I'm Joanne Watson, and this is your wake-up call.